It's our 50th review episode about a movie that came out almost 50 years after the comics introduced Earth's mightiest heroes. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss The Avengers. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today, co-host assembled. First up, from the 80s Flick Flashback podcast, he laughs way too hard when Tony calls Thor Point Break. It's Tim Williams.
That guy's playing Galaga. No one thought you would notice, but we did.
And next up, he may actually know what happened in Budapest. Please welcome Chad Smith.
I can talk about this all day.
And even though Tim stole it already, and finally, that man is playing Galaga. It's Blake Fowler.
I can change mine if you want me to.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, what does the Marvel Universe and zombies have in common? No one's ever really dead, I found out, Phil Coulson.
Nice Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reference.
Is he, though? Is he though? Oh, that might be a whole conversation on its own. All right, so here we are. It is June, so we like to do anniversaries of movies, comic book movies that are celebrating some sort of anniversary, and it is shocking to me that it has been 10 years since The Avengers came out in May 4th of 2012, so a year and a month ago.
Until you see Captain America's costume, and then you're like, oh yeah, that was 10 years ago.
That was a long time ago.
And Thor's, Thor's costume is pretty terrible too.
Thor's is different in like every movie.
It wasn't quite as striking though, Like, you just see...
well, I think with Captain America, it was the cowl.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was the cowl. There was just something wrong about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go into the first thing, and I want to talk about this. So we'll go around based off of the way I see you guys on my screen. When did you first see this movie? But I got a follow-up question. And how many times have you seen this movie?
Ooh.
All right. So we'll start with Tim. Go ahead, Tim.
I did see this pretty sure opening weekend, probably opening day, if not like the night before preview showing. And I don't know how many times I've seen it, but watching it again today, I didn't have to watch it that closely because I was repeating a lot of the same lines. Yeah. So I've probably seen it at least between 5 to 10 times, easy.
Yeah, definitely. Chad?
Yeah, so I saw it opening night. I saw it May 4th, 2012. And I think I saw it 2 more times in the theater. And then I'm not sure past that. At least 8, 9, 10 times? I don't know. It's been quite a few.
Blake?
As we all know, I have some DC biases, and 2012, if everyone will remember, was the summer of The Dark Knight Rises. So
it's the summer of The Avengers.
So I did a lot of Dark Knight Rises watching. This past week was my first time seeing the movie start to finish.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen Endgame, Infinity War. I kind of did some like Avengers for Dummies reading prior to going to see those movies. But yeah, the first time sitting and watching The Avengers start to finish was this past week.
This is going to be a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Way to bury the lead, Laramy. Jeez.
Right.
Crazy.
No one can see everybody's reaction, but I am currently being excommunicated from the Moving Panels podcast.
We're just in shock.
So what you're also not hearing, listener, was before we were recording, we found out that he's also never seen any of Star Wars. So
the one he thought he saw wasn't the right one.
I've seen one Star Wars, the wrong one, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, episode 8
you
or something.
Saw the wrong one.
Yeah. This is, how do you say, not a good night for me.
Yeah, so I too, unlike Blake, I saw this, I saw the midnight screening.
Yeah.
So I remember the midnight screening in 3D.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, I'm pretty sure, Blake, I went with Reese.
I'm sure you did. So my uncle, for listeners, loves all the Marvel movies. Yeah. He and his wife and their daughter absolutely fully into them. So I'm sure you did, Larry. I mean, you can see that happening.
And I've probably seen it just like Chad and Tim and normal people. I've probably seen it a good 10 times or so, good dozen.
Just like, wait a minute, hold on, like normal people? Excuse me?
Yeah.
Chad and I are trying to bury our laughter so we're not overtaking
not
the...
seen.
I just never got around to it. Like I said, I was full on Dark Knight Rises. Seriously, 10 times in theaters that summer. No joke.
Why?
That's not even...
But that one's... If it was the Dark Knight,
that's what I'm
give
saying.
it to you.
It's not the
but
best
Dark
one.
Knight Rises?
But it was Batman. I don't care. There's something in the way, guys, of that movie strikes me. There's the Batman reference for those of you who haven't seen it yet. The Nirvana song.
No.
Okay. All right. I've got it.
Okay.
So what's that? Sorry, my dentist is calling me. I've got an appointment to go to. See y'all.
So my next thing to mention, I didn't think that. I honestly thought the thing I was about to say would be the most shocking thing, but I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and take care of the elephant in the room. Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go ahead and say we will talk about Joss Whedon, but we will talk about Joss Whedon as a director, as a writer. We will not talk about him as a person.
Nope.
We will separate the art from the artiste.
Yeah. I think you have to look at it in what we knew about him at that time. Like,
yes.
This is the height of Joss Whedon, arguably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like,
For sure, yeah.
He was very much at like the tip top of his powers, well respected. You know, being apparently dump trucks of money backed up to his house to make movies. So yeah, I think you have to view this movie in that sense.
Yeah. So just making that clear. So if anyone hears this and hears us talking in positive praises about Joss Whedon, we are talking about him as a director for this movie and at the time, and we are I'm just going to leave it at that. So this, of course, is based off of comics, obviously. The first Avengers comic came out in September of 1963. So again, almost 50 years before the movie was when the comics was released. Of course, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who created all the individual
Virtually
characters that made up the Avengers. So let's get into those characters. For the movie, it is Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. And you could probably also throw in Nick Fury as well, with Loki being their first villain. In the comics, you had Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, then Ant-Man, Wasp, and this was Hank Pym Ant-Man and Janet Van Dyne Wasp, or Janet Pym. And Captain America does become an Avenger, but not until like issue 4, which is when he's thawed out, when they bring him into modern day.
Gotcha.
And he's thawed out.
And this is a super small point, but it's really a Giant Man, not Ant-Man.
Well, it was Ant-Man first.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Ant-Man first, and then Giant Man kind of became the main character he played. But Loki also was their first villain.
Yeah.
So that plays out too. So what are y'all's thoughts? I mean, we talk about each one of these characters individually, and we talk about their own movies and whatnot. But what are your thoughts, one, on the idea behind getting these characters together? What are your thoughts about the change in not including Ant-Man and Wasp? And yeah, let's just talk about the cast in general. So anybody thoughts on the cast?
I'll go first as the newest viewer to this cinematic masterpiece here. I was okay with not seeing Ant-Man. Again, I kind of watching this backwards because I've gone and seen the current movies, and I'm going back and watching this. Even right now, or I guess not right now, but in recent history, Ant-Man is not that popular, I would say. The movies have made him somewhat popular, but I think as a comic book character to begin with, not really someone people were banging down the door to go see in a film.
But see, that was the whole idea behind the comic.
Right.
It was taking a bunch of mid-level
kind of misfits,
characters and putting them together, because the idea was, oh, I'm interested in this team. oh wait, you're telling me Iron Man's got his own comic? Let me go read the Iron Man comic, or let me go read the Thor comic. I mean, that was the whole idea behind making them this team.
Well, if you're starting out this team, and this is the first movie they're a full team in, are you really going to hedge your bets on Ant-Man bringing people in?
I think you also have to look at I mean, this is obviously like pre-Me Too and that sort of thing, but the Hank Pym character in particular had kind of taken a beating. That was a bad choice of words. Sorry. So
Wasp is the one that took the beating.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So you were riding a wave of unpopularity with Hank Pym, and I think they did exactly the right thing, in hindsight, by making it Scott instead. And I mean, it's just a funny movie. Like, Ant-Man was done perfectly once they decided to do him. And I think even his inclusion in Civil War is just brilliant. Like, his whole, like, being the normal guy that's meeting the rest of them and everything. Like, it's super funny.
Starstruck.
So we get a good payoff there. I like that they stuck mainly to the original cast of the Avengers. I mean, it's good that they added Black Widow, so you do have a female Avenger, like, right from the word go. I think that was important. But I think arguably I would say the one that was the biggest gamble was the Hulk. I mean, you're coming off of two pretty bad Hulk movies, so the fact that they felt strongly enough to bring him in was good. The other Iron Man's a no-brainer. He's the one that ties everything together to begin with. In particular, Captain America, perennial favorite. Like, that one's hard to miss on as well. So I think it's a well thought out group that they used here.
Yeah, I think
so. Let's go back to what you said about Hulk. Sorry, Tim, to interrupt, but what were your thoughts on the whole Edward Norton was supposed to be the Hulk, and then they switched to Mark Ruffalo? So do you think Edward Norton would have worked in this movie?
No. I personally, the Norton Incredible Hulk movie, I actually liked. I mean, I don't think it's as great as some of the other Marvel movies, but it was definitely better than the Ang Lee
Eric Bana.
Hulk movie, Eric Bana Hulk movie. But to Chad's point, I think the Hulk still works because he is one of the more recognizable characters. Yeah. So even changing who was playing Bruce Banner and even somewhat changing the look of the Hulk to look more like, Bruce Banner, which I thought was really smart. Mm-hmm. The Hulk is still, I would say before the Iron Man movie, Hulk was still more popular than Iron Man and maybe even Captain America just because of the TV show, even though it's not as frequent reruns now. But it's still a character that, and two, because you had two failed movies, it's still a name that's been around that people would recognize. Like, oh, there's the Hulk. They may not have even seen the first two movies. Like, oh, there's another Hulk movie. Not that that's the reason I went to go see this movie, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Excellent point.
And once you see the movie, you need the foil to Tony Stark's brilliance. Like, you need somebody else in the room that's as smart as Tony Stark is.
Right.
So you need that character, I feel like, in that storytelling. But
I do like this version of Bruce Banner a lot better than the Edward Norton version of Bruce Banner.
Yeah. He's not a brooding strain.
Yeah, not as brooding.
Yeah.
I also like the Black Widow Hawkeye being connected to S.H.I.E.L.D. Because that's kind of where all this got set up, was having this Avengers initiative that Nick Fury originally started. Although, y'all may have to help me with this. When did the Avengers initiative get shut down? Because they talk about in this movie that they are reopening the Avengers initiative.
I want to say it's in the end of Iron Man 2 that Fury brings the initiative to Tony, or Tony discovers it, and I think there's a line there that he said it's something we're looking at, but I think we're going to shut it down. But of course that was also before Thor, which was opening kind of, you referenced here, like, we have all these weapons because of Thor. When an alien has now come to Earth, Now we
Yeah.
know we need a team like this. Of course, at that point, we didn't know about Captain Marvel, that he had dealt with aliens before, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm kind of wanting to discuss is the way this connects once, because this was really, as much as you say that Iron Man is what started it, Avengers is what it was, the Big Bang.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Avengers, that was the all right, now it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything's now connected.
Everywhere.
I'm going to go and get into this before we start talking about too much to the movie. Let's go ahead and start into this. So we all, and we talk about this with, the X-Men, with all superhero characters, really. So when you were a kid and you were, reading your copy of Wizard magazine, or you were just playing around with friends and whatnot, who did you want to cast in the Avengers movie? Blake and Chad, I'll let you go because I've spoken with Tim ahead of time about a list that Tim's going to give. So, Blake, Chad, do y'all have anybody y'all would cast as the Avengers before we got the cast we got?
Brad Pitt as Captain America.
Really?
It's a very 90s answer.
Hands down. I love the 90s, man. Come on. It's the best time.
80s rule. Go ahead.
You got anybody, Chad? Is there somebody particular?
Honestly, it's kind of hard to separate all the memes that have been done about this over the years. So, I mean, you have the like stereotypical that Tom Cruise would have been Iron Man, which I actually 100% disagree with. I think that would have been a terrible movie. I mean, if you're going 80s, I think you almost could just bring Lou Ferrigno back. Like,
What about Arnold?
Yeah, I was. Listener can't see this, but a poster of Predator is behind Tim, so I immediately thought Arnold. For that, but I don't know, man. Like, is Brad Pitt like, and I mean literally big enough, not like stardom big enough. Like, is he bulky enough to play Captain America?
I could see that being potentially a problem. But I don't know. I think we always talk about if you got a mask on, you got to have the jawline to pull the mask off.
Oh,
and
man.
If there may not be a better jawline in Hollywood than Brad Pitt. Brad, call me, man. Hit me up.
I think Bruce Campbell would have something to say about the
Okay.
jawline.
I may not be able to argue with
I
that.
would like
Just
to
wanna
see
throw that
Bruce
out there.
Campbell as Hawkeye. Because Hawkeye in the books is
Hawkeye.
super quippy, and like he would have made a
that would be
great
good.
Hawkeye.
Yep.
That's a good one. I didn't
That
think
is a
about
good-
that one. That's a good one.
Oh, here we go. If Arnold Schwarzenegger is playing the Hulk, what about Danny DeVito as Bruce Banner?
Oh my god!
That's
All
an
right,
interesting
I like our
take.
movie. Yep. Oh, dude.
All right, I can't hold it anymore. All right, so Tim, as host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast, I have given you the task of casting this movie as if it was an 80s movie. So let the rest of us know, what is your 80s movie cast of the Avengers?
Okay, so Laramy asked me this question, and I immediately put on my overthinking cap. So this had a lot of thought went into it. There's probably going to have a lot of discussions and a lot of, if you can see my notepad, I've marked names out and I have backups.
This
for
is made in
several
July
characters.
of 1986. It is no, just
Right. Coming right off the heels. I'm not kidding. All right, so my first two I'm doing Tony Stark and I'm doing Iron Man and Captain America first, and I did not want to use these two people, but I have no other option. So I'm going Michael Keaton as Tony Stark, Iron Man. I mean, it's Batman.
Okay.
He's
How about I say it's
Okay.
Batman?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
It's
I
the
mean,
same
it's
principle.
almost the same character.
Yeah.
And then Christopher Reeve talking about the jawline, and he's bulky. That was the thing you had to deal with as far as Captain America. He is the all-American guy.
So you're casting Batman and Superman.
I am.
so. So in
I
your
am.
hypothetical,
I tried
like
not
Batman,
to.
And this is
Batman's
why
not
DC
till
is
89.
superior.
Yeah,
like
89.
Batman's not till 89. So I
Yeah,
could
well, this
get,
is like the Goldbergs. It's 80 something. So
Okay.
Yeah, that's
but
what
my
I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
I could see Michael Keaton having done Tony Stark instead of in our bizarro,
right in our in our
all the
alternate
multiverse,
universe.
right?
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Chris Reeves is already been Superman.
Right,
Like
right.
that's you can't get around that one. Like,
So my,
Yeah, 'cause
my
that was 70s.
Yeah, so my backup Captain America is Mark Harmon, because I think he was a good,
Okay.
Yeah.
kind of the clean cut All American guy. Doesn't have the build, and I even thought Kevin Costner, but he's got too much of the Southern kind of quality that you need Steve Rogers to have a little bit more city,
Brooklyn
more
kid,
Brooklyn. So like I said, I overthought this a lot. All right, so moving on. So Natasha, Black Widow, I'm going Carrie Fisher. There's no other, strong, tough woman. Can't fight that one.
No Sigourney
No
Weaver.
Sigourney. No. Too
Okay.
tall. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, Sigourney Weaver. That was a good choice. Like I said, I scratched out a lot of options. Thor, I went back and forth with a lot, and this was a kind of a sleeper for me. I went Christopher Lambert from Highlander.
Huh. Eh.
oh man,
I mean, how did you not go Patrick Swayze? I mean, he's
oh dude,
You got once again the Southern drawl is not going to work for Asgard.
Point Break.
Yeah, he's still Southern. He's still got that Texas accent. Was hard. It's hard to cover up. Bruce Banner, the Hulk. I wasn't thinking of the Hulk. I'm thinking in today's with the CGI. I wasn't thinking of the brooding. I was thinking more of the Bruce Banner character. I went back and forth, but I went Alec Baldwin because that kind of very smart. Think of Hunt for Red October.
Yeah.
Early 80s Alec Baldwin. I thought about Jeff Goldblum, but he's too quirky. Like he's the smart guy, but that would have been weird. Hawkeye, I went with Emilio Estevez, only because he's done some really dark stuff in the 80s. Because in most of the beginning of the Avengers, Hawkeye's under the spell, so he's really dark, and then he becomes the hero at the end. So I thought he could do that dual role pretty well. Now, here's my question about Nick Fury: am I doing comics Nick Fury, or am I doing movie Nick Fury?
It doesn't matter. It's the Hoff.
No, I actually went Kurt Russell if you're doing comics.
Sean Connery.
Well, yeah, but Kurt Russell, aren't you just casting him as Snake?
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with
Plissken,
that.
yeah.
Like,
No, but the movie
still
version,
It
I
is
would
the
give.
80s. You
It is
can
the
do
80s,
that,
yeah.
Laramie.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
just play the same character in a
Yeah.
different universe. So.
I'm like Chad. I've seen that the fan made 80s Avengers movie with the David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury so many times that it doesn't work for me anymore. But if I went with
but have you seen the movie?
No, and I don't
Have
want
you
to.
seen the Nick Fury movie?
No. And then, but for more like the Samuel Jackson character, I went Lou Gossett Jr. for Nick Fury. I thought he has kind of that.
That's pretty good.
For Loki, I went David Bowie.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So far, I'm doing pretty good. I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna skip
checks.
over.
It's very similar to his character from Larry.
Exactly.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna skip over one of my because I'm gonna make that last because I have to really have us think about that one. But these are add-on, not that important. But for Pepper Potts, I went Meg Ryan. It's a small part.
Good call.
And then Maria Hill.
Oh, what if Tom Hanks was Tony Stark?
Yeah, I thought about that too. That's great chemistry, but I just don't see him.
Can't see Tom Hanks as Tony
80s,
Stark,
like
Laramie.
90s,
He's too-
90s
yeah.
Tom
I don't
Hanks
know.
could probably pull it off. But 80s Tom
80s,
Hanks was
he's
still
too young.
goofy. He
Yeah.
was still goofy in comedy.
I'd say Tom Hanks for Bruce Banner before I'd say Tony Stark.
Yeah, once again, still too goofy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, 90s Tom Hanks, I think he could kill it, but 80s.
Okay.
And then Maria Hill, I went Jamie Lee Curtis. Another tough
Okay.
Okay.
tough person. But Agent Coulson was probably the one that I struggled with the most.
Here we go.
And I'm looking at age because if Agent Coulson is under Nick Fury, he couldn't be older than Kurt Russell or Gossett Jr.
There's so much thought in this.
I know he's got to be likable. He's got to play that fanboy kind of persona with Captain America and all that kind of stuff. I went Matthew Broderick as Agent Coulson,
Nice.
Huh.
and that's my
I can
list.
see
Thank you
that.
very much.
Okay.
Yeah. I can see
Yeah, I
that.
do like that actually.
Okay.
Everybody soaking for a second
Yeah,
here.
no.
Everybody.
Yeah, I'm
No, that
just-
works.
yeah.
Just thinking about.
It's pretty good.
I'll post it on social
It's not-
media
it's not a
later.
bad-
You
yeah.
can think about it more. But yeah,
That's not
That's
bad.
a pretty good cast,
So-
Tim.
So you would keep with the movie characters and not jump in. You wouldn't crisscross and add any characters like Ant-Man or Wasp.
no, I didn't do it. I didn't do
anybody
any.
like that?
I only did the Avengers in this movie. That's the only ones I focused
Yeah.
on.
Same script, just plug and play. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, sort of, for the most part. Yeah.
as you were going through that and being the fan that I am, and going off of Chad talking about Hawkeye having to be quippy, what about Bruce Willis for Hawkeye?
I thought I had him down.
Yeah, I was waiting.
Yeah, I actually had Bruce Willis down for Bruce Banner and the Hulk, but that would be very against type for him in a sense. But I thought he could play that dual role really well too. So
he's Fury.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he could be Fury too. Yeah, yeah. I had Kevin Bacon as Hawkeye for a minute. Who else did I had?
Kevin Bacon he'd have to bulk up, but I could see Kevin Bacon as Thor.
Okay.
Actually,
yeah,
that'd be a pretty good one. I don't know. That's a lot of fun. There's a lot of good '80s actors.
There's ton.
Well, if we just want to go '80s, Vincent D'Onofrio as Thor.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. He did play Thor in Adventures in Babysitting, and I actually had Elizabeth Shue as Maria Hill until I settled on Jamie Lee Curtis. So
not bad.
Fun. I'd say that's it's a doable cast.
A lot of fun.
There we go. All right. Anything else you want to talk about character-wise? Chad, you mentioned the "I can do this all day." Does he ever actually say that in this movie?
No, that's in the first Avenger.
But I think there was a moment, and I'm trying to think of where it was. There was a moment. It was Thor. It was when they're on the street, and Thor comes up, and Thor asks Cap, "How you doing, old man?" or something like that. And he gets up, and I'm thinking,
he's going to say
it. Yeah.
And he doesn't say it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I guess it hadn't become his thing yet.
Right.
Yeah, but there was also like 22 times we thought that someone was going to say Avengers Assemble that we didn't get a payoff until Endgame. So,
yeah, but how awesome of a payoff.
Oh, my
gosh. It was worth it.
It's a great payoff.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
All right, so let's get into what I guess little moving panels there are here, because the storyline is not from the comics at all. So really, one of the only things we can talk about is kind of the way that they were formed, or the way, I guess, the Avengers are established, or however you want to say it. So in the comics in 1963, there was another member of the Avengers, I guess you would say. His name was Rick Jones.
Good old Rick.
Yeah. So Rick Jones, just a friend of the Hulk, kind of one of those like little sidekicks that superheroes had around this time. What happens in the comic? So Loki ends up tricking the Hulk, and Rick Jones is trying to get the help of the Fantastic Four.
Okay.
Loki does something to divert the message so that it goes to Thor. Although Thor is Donald Blake. For those of you that don't know, that Thor actually has a human persona in the comics of Donald Blake. But somehow the message is also picked up by Ant-Man, Wasp, and Iron Man.
Because comics.
So, yeah.
Makes sense.
So Thor, once he realizes it's Loki, he goes after Loki. They all, of course, are coming to help calm Hulk down, but Thor realizes it's Loki, so he goes after Loki, while the other three try to, take care of the Hulk. Which is funny because the Hulk doesn't realize what's going on. Like, by the time they catch up to the Hulk, like, he's just chilling. I actually think he was. I think he's helping, like doing some sort of charity work or something when they come up to him.
Oh my gosh.
But but anyway, long story short,
Dude, 60s comics are the best.
yeah, 60s comics are so great.
Hulk build habitat for humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want another spoon of soup? So they defeat Loki. They realize Hulk wasn't at fault, and again, 60s comic. Ant-Man just goes, you know what? I think we should stay a team.
Yep.
And so they decide to stay a team. Wasp comes up with the name the Avengers,
Okay.
and voila!
That's how all my friendships have started.
right there.
I think we should just stay a team.
Yeah.
You mean it didn't come
Yeah.
from Captain Marvel's ship from 1990 that they came up with the name?
No.
To play to what,
But obviously, go
to
ahead.
play to what you were talking about earlier about them being kind of a band of misfits, mid-level comic characters. You can see the thought process in the story writing though, because the Hulk and Thor are the two biggest of the characters at the time that this comes together. Like Thor was already a fairly established guy, and Hulk was arguably pretty popular. So you can see why they wrote it the way they did. You have a storyline apiece hinging on the two characters people do know, and you just drag them in, surreptitiously that way. And then, of course, you add Captain America a few later to bulk it up a little bit and give it some real firepower. But you got to wonder, is that a calculated thing even? Because they were like, if this Avengers thing just tanks, we don't want Cap to go down
America.
with it. You don't want him tied to this albatross. So, that sort of thing.
Again, we've already talked about they didn't use these characters in the movie. Instead, they used what were the Ultimates, which was the name of a lot of people don't realize this, that in that alternate universe, they're not called the Avengers. They're called the Ultimates. And this was in 2002 when this whole series of comics came out. This is where we had Nick Fury, who looked more like Samuel L. Jackson than he did David Hasselhoff.
Especially Thor.
But this is where
is much closer to the Ultimates.
Yeah. But this is where the team consisted of Captain America, Giant Man, Wasp, Hulk, and Iron Man. Those were the main ones. And then characters like Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, and Black Widow kind of, came in, went. They were kind of interchangeable characters. It was also in this run that their main villain were the Chitauri, the same aliens that they fight in this movie.
Okay.
Which was in the Ultimate Universe. This was the Skrulls, because the Skrulls were the big villains, alien villains in the main Marvel comics, and this was just, let's just make a different version of them like we were doing with all their characters. So they come up with the Chitauri, which are shapeshifters, just like the Skrulls are. Chitauri in the comics are shapeshifters, but they don't play around with that. Do you think they already planned on bringing the Skrulls in later?
I mean, let's be honest.
Possible.
Marvel wasn't into great villain writing yet. Like,
Nah.
Loki is a
true.
fairly clever villain, but past that, I mean, the Chitauri are automatons. Like, they're glorified robots.
Yeah. Okay. Since you're going off of that, let's talk. I want to talk about this. The giant ship dragon.
Yeah, what was that?
/ space worm.
Right.
Yeah. Is it a ship? Is it a creature? Is it a creature with a ship on top of it?
Yes.
Because they come out of it like it's a
Like
ship.
spores.
Right.
Yeah. But it has a mouth and kind of moves like it's organic.
I was uncomfortable watching
What
it. I
was
know
it?
that much. I did not like it at all.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was.
Am I and this, we can edit this out if it doesn't make sense. Am I crazy that the end of this movie and the end of one of the Transformers movies seem to be the same thing?
You're not wrong.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. I was like, I'm
You're
not
pretty spot
crazy.
on there.
No.
Yeah, because didn't they have some other robotic kind of worm creature in one of the
Yeah.
Transformer movies? So I don't know who stole from who. I know the first Transformer movie had come out before this, but like when the
I
cars
think it was
started blowing
later,
up
yeah.
and all the people were running around screaming. I was like, I've seen this before, but it wasn't this movie. Why am I thinking of Transformers all of a sudden? So,
Yeah.
no, Michael Bay.
No, I mean, you just needed a random army is all it comes down to. Like, Loki cannot... And I do think there's good writing in this. Like, they didn't make the normal comic book mistake where your villain is actually the strongest individual there is because he takes on the entire team all the time, kind of thing. So I was kind of glad they didn't do that trope. I would have been upset if it was just Loki versus the Avengers for the whole movie. So you do need him to have some ally, and you get the Chitauri out of it. I get it. Like, you don't need a backstory for him or anything. They're hired guns, and Loki uses them. Yeah. So I'm okay with that.
I agree with that. I agree with that. So the only other comic book connection really is the Tesseract itself, which, even though the Tesseract's not so much for the comics, the form it is in, it is clearly supposed to be a cosmic cube.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, there's several of those in the comics. The first cosmic cube, since I haven't done a lot of comic connections, let's go ahead and do this one. First cosmic cube appearing in Tales of Suspense number 79 in July of 1966. It was created by AIM, who we were introduced to in Iron Man. And then this is what I found funny. The original cosmic cube in the comics, it had the ability to turn any wish into reality. And I immediately thought of Wonder Woman 84.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I've heard that plot point before.
Yeah.
And seen it executed poorly, but yes.
Oh.
So let's just be glad that didn't happen.
Okay.
And like I said, there's been several cubes throughout the years. They would change the ability of the cube to, whatever the comic storyline needed.
Because comics.
They even at one point made it where the cosmic cubes were sentient, I think. Like, where they were actually a living being. So it gets a little bit more convoluted than all that. Here it is what the cosmic cubes were kind of originally in the comics. They were just a vessel to carry something else. Right. And of course, as we find out, it's an Infinity Stone. But what'd you think of the use of the Tesseract in this movie? Because we got to see it used a lot more in this movie than we did in Captain America when it was first introduced. So what'd you think about the way that they used it? Of not only is it creating portals, but it apparently you take a piece of it, put it in a in a staff, and it can give
zapping powers.
Well, I'll be
zapping.
honest. That's one of my few criticisms of this movie is the plot point of Clint Barton being possessed by it. Apparently, it also can cast the Imperious Curse. Like, I don't really understand what that deal was. And it's not that I don't like that plot point, but moving past this, it's never used again. You would think if Thanos has that ability, you'd kind of think he'd use it. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me when he fights the a very powerful group of the Avengers, if he could just touch one of them and then turn him on the rest of them. So it is a little bit of a plot point in that they quickly realized that was almost too powerful of a ability for the Infinity Stone to have, and so then they were like, let's not mention that again. So but anyways.
Now, I thought the same thing. Again, having kind of watched this in reverse, I was wondering, well, why did I not see this power in the later movies? Like Chad said, it'd be super easy just to kind of build an army of superheroes by walking around and tapping them with this particular Tesseract Infinity Stone or Cosmic Cube built by AOL Instant Messenger. Apparently, AIM created these. That's pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's like Chad said. It's too much. Let's retcon it essentially and lessen the power some.
Yeah, I think with your point about, I think they definitely wanted to show its power in this movie, which is why it was introduced in Captain America and not used as much, because it's just something to connect those two. Because of course Captain America came out right before this one did, or it was the movie before this one. So, but Yeah, I've never really, in the full MCU Thanos arc, the Tesseract has been one of the stones that I really was like, what does it even do? I didn't understand its power as much as I understood the other Infinity Stones.
It
seemed like you didn't even need the other Infinity Stones if the Tesseract did what it did in the Avengers. Like, it opens portals, it makes people zombies, essentially. What else are you needing?
Yeah, or even, like, to flip it, it would have been the perfect weapon to use against Thanos. You just hit him with it and be like, oh, you forgot about this whole quest to kill half the universe. Go about your way.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of a writing flaw with the Tesseract in this particular movie. So, yeah.
But I think to your point too, Chad, I think there are still the villain plot points were still weak at this point. They were still kind of maturing or getting better at developing those aspects of the storytelling as they got going.
And credit to Tom Hiddleston for making Loki as what's what I'm looking for, as riveting, as engaging as he is.
Right.
I think he punches above the weight of what's written.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Certainly could have phoned it in, but very good performance.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. I also liked his speech about being a god that gets immediately interrupted.
That was an awesome moment. I'd never seen that live. Like, I've seen like memes
7
and
words
stuff,
in.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
One of the best moments in the movie for sure.
Yeah, very cool.
Puny god.
I'm sure that reminded Samuel L. Jackson of his encounter with a shark.
Now we're talking about a movie I have seen. I understood that reference.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a good one. So let's go ahead and get into that. What are some of your favorite scenes? What are the scenes that stick out? Because I think all of us, with the exception of Blake, as we are watching this movie, like, we're watching it, we could quote most of it. It's not a movie that you really, I don't know, I'm not speaking for Tim or Chad, but like, I'm watching it going, yeah, it's like I just saw this movie. Like, it's so fresh in your head so much because and to me, that's Joss Whedon. That's Joss Whedon. That's Joss Whedon writing. A lot of people have issues with when Joss Whedon writes, everybody's got to have quips, everybody's got to have funny lines. But at the same time, that's what makes it memorable. In a lot of, Joss Whedon does go sometimes too far with that, as he did with Justice League, but we've talked about that one. So
let's not go back down that road.
But yeah, so what are some of the scenes that you stick out? And we'll start with Blake, since this was Blake's first time watching this movie.
So
we'll start with Blake. Go ahead.
So I again have seen the DC movies. I've seen heroes assemble sorta in the DC movies, and I have seen the GIFs or GIFs, however you pronounce it, of the Avengers assembling on the street. When your coworker teacher group chat sends it to assemble for tacos after school or whatever. But seeing it happen in the context of the movie was incredibly cool. The music was spot on for that scene. The camera pan, with just circling the wagons, so to speak, with all the Avengers there, was a very cool moment. And I was like, I understand why Marvel fans got real hype about this. I mean, it was a big moment for the first time to see them all on the screen at the same time, because before correct me if I'm wrong, before that moment, they hadn't all been together on the screen all at one time. Yeah, they'd been like in different places, or a couple of people had been here, or the Hulk was running around tearing a hole through a boat plane thing, and it was just nobody ever been in the same spot.
Hulk,
just not being the Hulk.
Bruce
Correct.
Banner.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, that was the moment that sticks out the most for me, was seeing that and thinking, all right, so that's what this is all about.
Any of the, maybe from the first half of the movie, any scene that kind of stuck out to you?
One that sticks out to me only because I read a bit of trivia about it. The scene where Tony Stark is eating blueberries while he's talking to Bruce Banner and Captain America. That was apparently improv. Like Robert Downey Jr. just picked up a bag of blueberries, and the Mark Ruffalo and Chris Evans just reacted like how they thought their characters would react to being handed blueberries.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. The Galaga thing. Yeah, a lot of funny quips. I'm not typically a fan of the quips, but it worked. It worked in this movie. There wasn't so much that it was overbearing. There was enough to be funny and enjoyable. So yeah, those are my moments.
Yeah, I think even though we talk about Joss Whedon's writing, I think with someone like Robert Downey Jr.,
it works.
Lets him do.
Just let him be.
I'm just gonna let you do what you do.
Yeah.
And with him being such a draw, like Chad was talking about earlier, for this movie, I mean, you're really looking at you got Samuel L. Jackson, but in terms of our heroes, he was the big name.
Right.
I mean, all these other guys are fairly new.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
no one knew Chris Hemsworth before he played Thor.
Nope.
Mark Ruffalo was kind of an independent movie guy. Like, he had been in a few things.
Talk about Chris Evans.
Chris Evans had just been getting going. Of course, he had played the Human Torch, but he wasn't a leading man yet. Same with Scarlett Johansson and even Jeremy Renner was kind of an independent guy like Mark Ruffalo. So yeah, I think when you've got like Robert Downey Jr. Being such the what word am I looking for? But
the lead star or the lead actor.
yeah, but not just the lead star, but being
He's your
like I'm
he's
saying,
your cash cow.
more experienced. Yeah. You just let him go and let him do whatever he's going to do, because you also want to make him happy.
Yeah.
Well, he kicked. I mean, with Iron Man became such a big hit, he had a lot to do with that because Tony Stark character, which he kind of developed that Tony Stark character. So you got to let him shine in this assembling of the other heroes as well movie.
So apparently, though, with the food thing in particular, he's got like a snack in like every scene.
Every scene, right? Yeah.
Right.
And he made that part of Tony Stark's whole thing. And apparently that was not them cutting him loose because he was told not to do it. I don't know how true this is.
Right.
This is like, just stuff you read or whatever. But they had told him not to do that. So some of the reactions are genuine in the sense that, like, they're like, oh, he's just breaking the rules.
He's
like,
just
he wasn't
doing whatever he wants
supposed
to
to
do.
do this.
Yeah.
He's
But that's
being
what Tony Stark
Yeah,
does. Yeah,
exactly.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Nose goes there, bud.
And it's also Robert Downey Jr. going, what you gonna do? Fire me?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, no joke.
all right, Tim, what about you? Favorite scenes?
I mean, I mentioned the Hulk versus Loki, or his pummeling scene, which is one of the greatest. Kind of going to. Go ahead.
Sorry
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt. But for I have a question, except for Blake. Did y'all hear
Blake is somewhat
when
offended.
you saw this in the theaters? Did you hear Hulk say "puny God"? Because I did not. When I saw this in theaters,
I think it was like the third
because
or,
of the laughter.
I think it was at the
Yeah.
third or fourth showing where I actually heard what he said because you couldn't hear it in the theaters. Everybody was laughing, and I do have like when that movie was like when it finally made out to video or when it was on cable or whatever. One of my friends, like younger kids, like they would just rewind that part over. They would watch that scene over and over and over again. So that was like one of their favorite scenes. So.
Oh, I've got a GIF where someone looped it perfectly, so that it is just a nonstop beating.
Right.
But
it's great.
But my favorite part of that scene is the one like superfluous hit where you think it's over, and then he's just like one more time,
One more,
blam.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then hearing Loki's like trying to scream, but he doesn't have enough energy or can't get any wind in his lungs to scream, which I thought was fantastic. But going to Blake's point about, all the Avengers in one shot, going back to Loki, like after they've defeated and there's that, which I called like the screenshot. I actually like had a screenshot of that on my Facebook, profile picture, whatever, of all the Avengers there together with Hawkeye in the middle with the bow, kind of aimed at Loki. So that's one of those just kind of like, when I think of the Avengers movie, that screenshot is immediately emblazoned in my mind. But there's other great scenes too that are earlier. I mean, you have some good action with Iron Man and Captain America, working together to save the motor on the as Blake called it,
the helicarrier.
as Blake called it, the ship that flies or whatever
the
he called it.
hover boat plane.
Yeah, hover plane.
Shuttle.
The helicarrier.
And then, one of my favorite scenes, which always when it comes up, is when we see Natasha for the first time, and she's actually interrogating the Russian spies. That's definitely one of my favorite scenes. Which is like, I'm working here.
He's giving me everything.
This moron's telling me everything. I didn't tell her everything, So that scene I enjoy that scene whenever it pops up. So
I'm gonna say it. Hot take that 10 minutes is better than the entire Black Widow movie. I'm gonna say it. It is.
I enjoyed Black Widow, but I enjoyed it because of Florence Pugh.
I was like, I'm a big Florence Pugh fan.
If she wasn't, she saved that movie, in my opinion.
So, best scene in the Avengers. I don't know. You guys have hit a lot of really good ones. I like a lot of the we're kind of like backhandedly giving Joss Whedon a little bit of a hard time about like the quippiness, but giving him a little credit and everything. I do like how he gave every character like a vignette, though.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have that, like, this is Natasha Romanoff. Like, you get a view of her. And I love the moments before Hulk smashes Loki, when you have Tony Stark just doing Tony Stark and, like, fighting for time. Like, the suit is, virtually wasted. Like, he's kind of at the end of what he can do, that sort of thing. And he's just, being Tony and being intelligent and distracting the villain. And there's so many of those moments throughout this, though, where everybody just kind of gets their moment and you see, who they are. And of course there's the quippiness plays into that. You get, Bruce Banner, that's the secret, Cap. I'm always angry. And, just all of the, you know what I mean? Like, so it just works really, really well. And I mean, kind of the thing that we haven't talked about yet is the reason that we're celebrating this movie 10 years later. Like, this movie changed everything. It changed Hollywood. Like,
for sure.
Not just comic book movies. This changed everything. And I'm getting nostalgic about it or whatever, but I think it's because they actually told a comic book story for the first time. In the sense of, this is the way comic books are. You have 5-6 different characters and individual episodes that are doing their own thing. And then some writer goes, well, how cool would it be to see, the Hulk and Wolverine, or, he debuted in the Hulk. But anyways, but you get what I'm saying. Like, and so just being fans, comic book writers were like, we want to see so-and-so fight this other guy. And so you make them cross paths. And you have this whole thing, this whole history of how this movie happens that should have never happened. Like, if Marvel doesn't go bankrupt in the 90s and you get Dave Mazzel and Kevin Feige heading up this thing, and they go, like, how can we tell a different story that hasn't been done before? And they because they're running the company, they have the freedom to say, we're going to throw all sequel, stereotypes and tropes to the side, and we're going to do this the comic book way. And that's how you get this movie. And it's amazing. And it changed, like I was saying, like, you can't overstate that. It changed everything in movie making.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So this is from when you were a kid, when you saw, like, and Blake, this is an attack on you, but I just know you're younger than
what keeps happening here.
But do Chad and Tim and Blake, if you do, that's great. Do y'all remember the Say No to Drugs cartoon that aired that had Alf and the Ghostbusters and all of your Saturday morning cartoon characters,
all characters
all in one,
probably created on drugs, telling you not to do drugs. Yes, I remember this, Larry.
Yeah. But do you remember like how you saw each one and you just had that joy of, oh, it's so and so now with so and so, and did you get that same? Because I did. Yeah. Did you get that same feeling when all of a sudden there's Thor showing up with Iron Man, and then and Cap's there, because none of y'all talked about it. One of my favorite scenes is when they fight each other at the beginning. When Thor and Iron Man go at it, and then Cap has to break it up.
Right.
That is one of my favorite scenes. And part of it is, it's not just cool to see, like Chad was saying, to see them, what if these two fought, but just seeing those characters together, like that was just so exciting to me. And it reminded me of the stuff like that from when we were a kid, when you saw your characters from different shows coming together.
Yeah, definitely. I'm like you. It definitely gave me those same nostalgic feels of like seeing Who Framed Roger Rabbit for the first time in the theater, where you saw Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse in the same
Mickey
frame
Mouse,
together. Your two favorite cartoon, universes putting together.
Let's see that legally happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
so yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that. Definitely for sure. And yeah.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm gonna make what may be a left turn, but since I keep getting left out of so many of these conversations here, I'm gonna play host for a second. So today on Moving Panels, we're gonna talk about Phil Coulson's death.
That was my next point.
But
so you're good.
Since I already knew he's like, because he comes back in the Shield TV show or whatever. How did you all feel seeing him die on screen? Not knowing, maybe knowing that he could or could not return. How did that affect everybody in the theater?
So I'll go this one. So yeah, theater, of course, you get the big
for
gasp.
sure.
And of course, in the moment, you're shocked. I will say that later, I go, Phil Coulson's not that much of an idiot. Phil Coulson's smart enough to know that he can't go up against Loki on his own. Phil Coulson's smart enough to have a backup plan. Phil Coulson's supposed to be the super agent. Unlike Hawkeye or Black Widow. He's supposed to be this different type of SHIELD agent. And so I do kind of that takes away some of it. But yeah, it's still a shocking move. And then the whole bringing him back in S.H.I.E.L.D. was great, but the fact that they have not connected that back to the movies, it's
disappointing.
It kind of, as time has gone along, that death scene has diminished its impact, in my opinion.
Yeah. I guess I'll disagree with you a little bit. Like, I've never thought that it wasn't, that Coulson was too smart for that to have happened. I took it more of like that was his heart. Like he was the one that realized that they needed a catalyst to wrap around, and he just had done the quick math and knew that he had to pay the price, kind of thing.
He was expendable to a certain degree.
So it was a suicide mission for him.
Yeah, I think he knew the outcome. Like so I'm agreeing with you in a sense, but I think he knew the outcome and decided that was the only way that he was going to get that team to gel. So
interesting.
Which is pretty much what he said to Fury in that scene as well.
Right.
Yeah, I got to tell you though, for a guy who gets run through the chest like that, he handles it really well.
Just like it's nothing.
Yeah. He handles it. He sits there, has a conversation with Loki.
Yeah, to use an 80s quote, really pain don't hurt. It's all good.
Say, what has this man seen before that he just handles this like this?
Well, he saw Captain Marvel.
That's what I was going to say. Apparently he's seen a bunch.
But was that Phil Coulson? Was that one of the Skrulls?
Oh, man. Well, since you're talking about like things that don't kind of add up with the rest of the MCU, I still can't get over how the world doesn't react that much to an alien invasion and the destruction of New York City in following movies. Like, yes, they do play with the idea. The whole thing about Tony Stark being confronted by a mom, obviously that's much further on past Sokovia and all that stuff. But like Earth keeps having really horrible things happening to it. And apparently it is not our universe, because we got a really bad case of the flu and the world shut down and we can't stop talking about it. And like aliens showed up and destroyed an American city, and the world just like shrugs it off and moves on. It seems like. So that's probably that's my least believable thing about the Avengers.
Because you got the clips at the end of all the people, and they were like, you know, they saved us. You know, the heroes saved us, and it's like, I don't have a job to go to tomorrow because the building I worked in was demolished, but they saved us.
Yeah, that was the post-credit scene they didn't use. Was all of them on the streets, like sweeping the street and like picking up the carnage or whatever, and apologizing to, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to drop this alien spaceship on your building. We'll try to be more, or even Hulk when he saves Tony Stark, demolishes a building before coming to the ground. So go ahead, Blake. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Would have been a perfect spot for them to find the Hulk doing charity work at that point in time.
Yeah, there you go.
That would have great moving panel.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they have it as a one shot? Wasn't that the item 47 was about them cleaning up? After the aftermath?
Somebody found a piece of. They are, yeah.
Yeah, they are.
But yeah, somebody found one of the guns or whatever, and they were using it to rob banks or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. But I think they explained that S.H.I.E.L.D. is going around like cleaning everything up. Because I think they even did that on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like I think after Thor Dark World happened, they even showed where S.H.I.E.L.D. was on site cleaning up the aftermath.
And that was the beginning of Spider-Man Homecoming, was them coming in to take over all the stuff that Michael Keaton's company was cleaning up. Contracts.
It all comes back to Michael.
It always comes back to Michael Keaton.
Batman. All right, so Chad kind of got my last topic there, was the impact that this had. Let's kind of talk about it in general, though. What do you think the impact was of the Avengers? And we can expand out to DC. Do you think that the success of the Avengers was kind of I'm just going to throw this out there, a nail in the coffin to DC because it forced their hand, maybe? Or, what do you think?
I think it was certainly...
What do you think having the Avengers impacted the course of superhero movies in general?
Nail in the coffin is a little strong because they've had successful movies.
I agree.
But it definitely forced their hand to do something different that they surely were not prepared for, because what we saw that came after that did not match. We've always had that comparison, but it's one of those things. It's the oldest tale of Hollywood, where we've got two projects that look very similar. Whichever one comes out first, most likely is the one that becomes everyone's favorite. Even if, the one behind it isn't as bad, it's always going to be in comparison to the one they saw first. We saw that with, I'm going back to my podcast, we talked about Big Trouble in Little China was trying to get made before The Golden Child came out, because they both dealt with Asian mysticism, two totally different movies with totally different, storylines, but there was this big rush of, we've got to get this movie out first because we know the one that comes out first makes more money. Didn't actually work for them in that instance, but then you go to the 90s, Tombstone and Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp may be considered a better quote-unquote movie as far as like filmmaking wise, but I'll still put Tombstone. I'd rather watch Tombstone than Wyatt Earp every time. So
that's why you're my Huckleberry, Tim.
I did just to throw another couple of movies out there. Is that true for Deep Impact and Armageddon?
Those are the two movies I think of. We're talking about this situation. First two that come to mind.
I've actually never seen Deep Impact.
Because that Deep Impact came out first. They both came out in 98. Deep Impact, I think, came out in May, and then Armageddon came out in July.
Yeah, but nobody Michael Bay's out Michael Bay. All right,
yeah, that's true.
That's
true. Yeah,
it's a very aggressive Michael Bay reference.
Yeah, and to your point, I would rather watch Big Trouble in Little China over Golden Child, and I love Eddie Murphy, but Golden Child is not one of Eddie Murphy's best movies.
I think making those comparisons though is even a little bit faulty, because like this was a totally new paradigm. Like
True,
it wasn't
true.
like there were two projects kind of going at the same thing.
Yeah.
It was Marvel made movies in a new way, and DC Warner Brothers had to go, oh no, like we kind of have to now make our films in this way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're talking a what was it, 4 5 year gap between Avengers and Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what was the?
And then we're also talking.
What was the difference between Avengers and Man of Steel? Man of Steel had been out already. Because did that force their hand for Batman v Superman? Because wasn't that?
No, Man of Steel came out in 2013.
Okay, so after that.
Man of Steel came out after.
Right.
So Avengers is like I said earlier, it's kind of the big.
But Man of Steel, you get the references to Wayne Enterprises, and they're starting to try and tie things together. And I wonder if some of that is forced.
Oh, I do
from Avengers.
because I think the original plan was, and Blake can probably know better than me because he's a DC guy. I want to say there was supposed to be Man of Steel 2 there was supposed to be a direct sequel before they got into Batman v Superman, but they felt the pressure of rushing that, putting those two characters together because of the success of Avengers.
All right.
And then I love how in just comic book fashion, it's comic books, it's always Marvel and DC. Oh, hey, I'm gonna take this writer, I'm gonna take this this artist and whatnot. They did the same thing, because even though Justice League was originally Zack Snyder's, it turned into Joss Whedon's.
Ooh, yeah, it
and
did.
He wasn't as successful that time.
You're talking about the impact it had, and not necessarily correlating directly to DC, but just the ability and opportunity it gave writers, directors, producers to make comic book movies. Like for me, Kick-Ass is one of my favorite movies. I love it, and I don't think it gets made without the success of these comic book movies that came before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially, I 100% agree with that, especially considering you're right on the heels of Chris Nolan's Batman telling, where it was like, let's get super real world and dark and gritty.
Right.
So superhero movies have been being pushed that direction. And then Kevin Feige's like, no, I think we can make comic books, bright, vibrant comic books as movies. And so you have, this shot of the Avengers that's pretty stinking, panel spot on. So, I mean, I don't
bright
think
and colorful and
Kick-Ass in particular. I mean, you don't have that movie like where it's even a satire.
Now that was 2 years before, because that was 2010.
Right, but you'd already had Thor.
The planning is coming. Yeah.
You had had the storytelling that ends in this, and if you hadn't had Marvel start telling these stories, I agree with Blake. You don't have that sort of movie being made.
And it's going on to, like, right now the Sandman series is coming down the pipe on Netflix, and I don't think you get people taking a chance on these quote unquote children's comic book characters, some of them, without, I know Sandman's not. I know Sandman's not.
Yeah, I was about to say, not letting Blake watch my kids. So.
You're not. That's a great children's movie. Yeah, that's why I don't have any of my own, Chad. I don't think you get these opportunities.
Hi, kids. I want to introduce you to a comic book character called Preacher.
What a great series. Underrated, in my opinion. Never mind. That's another time there. I don't think you get the chance for all of these. And so I do have to sing Avengers praises for that.
Well, I think to that point, I think that comic book movies were being cranked out. Any kind of comic book movie was being cranked out before Avengers. Of course, Avengers, they were seeing the box office.
It was a slow, steady build since 2000 with X-Men. You were getting more and more and more and more, and then the train starts rolling and going.
Quantity, not necessarily quality, with the X-Men movies at a certain point.
True.
And then it becomes an art form. I'd argue that the Avengers Assemble scene in the first Avengers is not just an iconic comic book movie moment; it's an iconic movie moment.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it showed what a comic book, quote unquote, film can be. It can have some heart, some storyline. It's not just a bunch of guys in spandex running around.
Yeah.
And I would even say, even to the Nolan point that Chad was making, I don't look at the Nolan Batman series, and no offense to Blake, because I love those movies. I don't consider those like comic book movies. I consider them Batman movies.
Sure.
Because I don't think Nolan approached it as like a moving panel type movie like Whedon did with the Avengers. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's great. It's compelling. It's a great, compelling movie. Yeah. But Nolan took the comic book genre and gave it a more...
they're almost thriller action.
More, yeah. He gave it a more of a artistic, or not, it's not the word, auteurs, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, auteurs perspective on a comic book movie, whereas Avengers is a straight up, this is a comic book movie for sure.
Hitting those film class words there.
I got some education.
All right, well let's go ahead. We're already talking into it, but let's officially give our ratings here on moving panels. We call it Bag It, Stack It, or Trade It. So let's see. Let's go with Chad first this time. That way it's somebody first each time.
I know this is going to come as a shocker. This is, you bag it, you get it graded, you put it in the bank in a secure locker because like this is iconic. Like it goes beyond just being a worthwhile story, and it is a well-told story, but it literally changed an industry. Like it is an iconic, legendary movie. So has to be bagged for me.
Yeah, I mean, for all the reasons that Chad mentioned, it's definitely bag it. Don't let company breathe on it too hard. It needs to be well protected. But yeah, for all the same reasons Chad said, I agree 100%. Blake?
I'm going to have to agree with my first two guys here. Stepping back and looking at it from 30,000 feet, it changed the landscape of movies that we love to go see now. And so, I think you got to bag it, hold on to it. It is iconic, and take care of it, treasure it, and don't wait 10 years to watch it for the first time, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's obviously a bag it for me. I will say, is it the best of the Avengers movie? No. But it has its place. Are there other comic book movies that came out or have come out that rank above it? Mm-hmm. Yes. Does it hold up 10 years later? Majorly, yes. I still think, as we talked about earlier, I'm Always Angry is probably gonna be solidified always as the key moment of this movie, in my opinion. I think that just put a big stamp in, just like when the Hulk punches the dragon thing. Of okay, this is it. This is where we're going from here. And then I'm with Tim. That shot of all of them pointing with Hawkeye pointing the arrow at Loki, just said, all right, this is our team. This is where we're going from there. And of course we saw them develop over the next decade. And now we're in a whole new transition to see what's going to happen next, and curious to see where they continue this legacy that the Avengers created way back in 2012.
Tell us about your movies, Grandpa.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add an extra 30 minutes to the podcast, but I think this is apropos because it was after the end of the movie. I think the other thing about Avengers that gets very underrated and changed the way we see these films was Marvel had cleverly already taught us to stay for post-credits.
Right.
And they drop Thanos in the post-credits scene.
Yes.
And I think, Laramy, me and you talked on the phone like the next day. Like we both saw it, and there's a 4-hour time difference between us, so you were probably well asleep by the time I got out of the movies. But I'm pretty sure we talked about this the next day. And being two guys who knew who Thanos was already, like we were already getting excited for what they were doing. But you had a ton of people, and this movie was made perfectly at the right time. The internet had just really become a thing where people would go to Google and be like, well, what's going on with this? And, that sort of thing. And so when Marvel very cleverly gave themselves advertising dollars that like you couldn't buy, like that kind of press.
Yeah.
And so people were just going back to the internet, and now they're like, who is this dude? And I think it spawned this very podcast. Like, I don't think you have the YouTube channels around comic book movies and movies in general that we have today if you don't have Marvel very cleverly set the stage for the next movie. And I love how everything has changed with that. Now, like, we don't even really expect an ending. Like, yes, we got finalization of the Thanos storyline, but it just leads into the next thing, just like comic books do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Marvel even started doing like the James Bond ending, where at the end of the credits, it would say
Tony Stark will
Will
return.
return. Yeah.
But to your point, Chad, wasn't this the first mid-credits then post-credits scene? Because the mid-credits scene, I think mid-credits scene was Thanos, and the post-credit was just the fun scene,
the
Swarma scene.
Yeah.
So I think this is the movie that started that, because before then, all of those it was just post-credit.
Post-credit, yeah.
Which Tim always likes to provide the trivia to his movie. Do you know that Chris Evans actually has a beard in that scene, and so he has to keep his face covered because they had brought them back, a few months later to film that shawarma scene.
They filmed it the night before the premiere and like tacked it on to the very end. He had like some prosthetic jaw on that wouldn't let him open his mouth to try and cover the beard.
Yeah.
And it was just a whole mess. So I love the trivia aspect of these kind of movies.
So that's why he's sitting there like this.
Hand up.
He was filmed
with his hand on his...
He was filming Snowpiercer, I think, at that time.
Yeah. Another comic book movie. So, all right, gentlemen. Well, thank you for the assemblage here of our 50th review here on Moving Panels of the legendary Avengers movie of 2012 and all the greatness that it inspired. And thanks everybody for listening. For all of us, I know we've done more than 50 episodes with all the one shots, but this was our 50th review of a movie or television show. And so thanks for joining us for that. And we look forward to 50 more, and who knows what we might do for our 100th. But of course, you can join me and these gentlemen all individually at least every other week. One of them usually joins me, and along with my other guests, who unfortunately I couldn't have everybody on here. That probably would have been too jumbled up to have too many people on here at once. But thank you, everybody. Any last words from anyone?
I do want to, because I'm an 80s guy. There were two primary 80s references in this movie. Of course, we talked about the Gallagher reference. But do you also know who the waitress was that's prominent in the end scene with Captain America?
Yes, wasn't she the youngest daughter on Growing Pains?
That is correct. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Laramy gets the prize. And supposedly they were wanting to build out that character for some other something else, but she was actually already committed to something else and couldn't come back, so they kind of squashed those plans. But I did hear her do an interview talking about how she got into that role and how it was like one of her best moments of being an actress. She really loved it.
And how she's kicking herself for being like, no, I'm already signed onto this
right,
other project.
Exactly.
Yeah. Missing out on that Marvel money.
Yeah. Exactly. But yes, that was Chrissy from Growing Pains.
I do understand that reference also. Kirk Cameron is... Yeah, there you go. Just names that I know. Alan Thicke.
Show me that smile again.
Yeah, Canadian, eh? No, my final thoughts were... As much of a DC fan as I am, great movie as far as building on the Marvel Universe and finally bringing all those characters together and giving us what we have today. I am excited and glad that I finally watched it.
Yeah, still, that's just...
Next to Star Wars, guys.
The biggest... It's just shocking revelations that happened in this recording and before this recording. So. Chad, any last words?
I think I've said enough.
I think we have.
Never, Chad. Never.
I think we have. And if we tried to say any more, we again, like Chad said, we'd have another 2 hours to add to this this show. But we're gonna end it now. We'll stop the recording and we'll get on to we'll try to probe Blake as to what other things he hasn't
Not
seen.
without my consent, you won't, Laramy. Okay.
All right, but thanks everybody for listening. Follow us on social media. Give us those 5-star reviews, and go ahead and follow Tim with the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. It's a great listen as well, and we got our own little network going here. But for today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Hulk smash.
All right, and 3, 2, 1.
It's not our best clap.
Do we need to do it again, or?
So bad.
It was pretty bad. We were very white with that. So.
And the 1, and the 2, and the 3. Are we on the 1 and 3 or the 2 and 4? Just so we know we're clear.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from 3 nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.